All right, welcome back to the studio. This is a continuation of sort of my instructional videos for kind of a more advanced pot. So these are kind of pots from start to finish. This is a pot that I really love to make. It's just sort of a handleless cup that is squared off. I'm making this with 1.25 pounds of clay. I will end up trimming some clay out of this. So you could adjust yours accordingly if you want to make a little larger or a little bit smaller. All right, we're going to jump in here. I'm going to get this centered. So again, this is 1.25 pounds of clay. I'm going to push it into the middle of my wheel, and I'm going to start the centering process. All right, I'm applying downward pressure first. If you have any problems with centering, please check out my video, my centering video. I'm happy to help. If you have any other issues through the process, let me know and I'll be happy to cover them. All right, so this pot is a little bit of a hybrid between a bowl and a cup. So when I open, I'm going to open like a bowl, and I'm opening with a conical opening so that I have a bit of a curve in the base of the pot. I'm coming in. I am going to be trimming a foot on here, so I'm leaving a bit of material in the bottom, about 3/8 of an inch probably, maybe a little bit more than that. All right, now we're going to sort of set our foot where it needs to be. So I'm just wrapping my sponge over the side and kind of rolling that little double lip in, and then I'm going to be pushing in at the base to create a little bit of my foot. From here, I'm changing direction. So I'm supporting on the inside curve, and I'm gently coaxing my clay inward so that I have a rounded bottom followed by a wall with an upward trajectory. Okay, so I've got the height that I want. I'm going to set up the water from the inside of my pot, and I'm going to start by straightening the walls of this pot. So I'm using a wooden rib to do that. I'm bringing it in at an angle, and I'm going to come down and I'm going to cut away this extra material at the base. Take that away. I'm going to put my rib back on the side. I've reduced my wheel speed. And I'm pushing out from the inside against my rib. Getting a nice straight wall. I've lost a little bit of the indentation of my foot, so I'm going to use the curvature of my rib to just come underneath just a little bit. I'm supporting from the inside, getting a little bit of that angle. Okay. Now we have a couple things to do. We want to give an inward angle to the rim of our pot, so we're using our rib to do that. I'm supporting with my thumb, and I'm just gently moving this downward. I like to have an inward angle. I think that it allows the liquid from the cup to flow back down into the cup. All right. I'm going to suck up the water from the inside of this, and then we're going to make it square. So to square off this pot, I'm using a squared back, which is really helpful. It gives me 4 registration marks, kind of using the points of this bat. And so I'm using the middle finger from my left hand, coming to the corner, and just gently pushing out against my finger. I'm going to go to the other side of the pot, and I'm going to do the same thing, and then come to the corresponding sides and do the same. Once I've got this more or less square, I'm going to put my fingers inside, and I'm just going to correct a little bit of this to make it extra squared off. And then we're going to let this set up a little bit until it becomes leather hard, and we're going to flip it over and trim a foot. Okay, so welcome back. We are going to be altering this pot a little bit more. We can see that this is gently squared off. We're going to make this more of a crisp square. So this tool right here is called a Sureform. They sell ceramic versions of it. This is actually a replacement blade for a DeWalt Sureform, which you can get at any like big box hardware store. And I actually prefer to use it without the handle. And I just find that it's really maneuverable as just the replacement blade. Very inexpensive, and it works incredibly well. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be carefully holding my pot, and I am just Sureforming down the corners of my pot. So I'm essentially defining the square. So I'm working both sides of this corner in order to give myself an edge. And that edge is going to define the corners of my square. There's a bunch of different ways to do this. You could do it standing on the wheel. You can do it kind of by holding it. My pot's pretty soft still, so I'm going to be just doing it on the wheel. And I'm just going back and forth between either side of this corner. I'm working my way around. This is a square, so it has 4 corners. Once I get those corners defined, I'm going to come in and remove some of the other material. I like to do this over the wheel because, as you can see, I create a lot of trimmings while I'm doing this. So if I do this kind of on a table or something, I end up having to clean up a lot. Okay, so now I have my corners defined. I know that it will be difficult to see on camera, and that's okay. It will become more and more evident as I continue to work. So the base of my pot right now is pretty round. And so I want to come in and I want to take off that kind of belly, if you want to call it that. So now I'm going horizontally. I was going vertically before, but I'm going to sort of move horizontally, and I'm taking off this bottom rounded corner, and I'm just going to be making this cut more and more square. We can choose to leave the Sureform marks, or we can take them away. It's based on personal preference. I kind of like the grain that it leaves behind. Up to you whether you choose to leave this or not. I will show you how to remove it. Okay, so now my pot is starting to really look square. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start to remove some of the Sureform texture. What I like to do here, we can use sort of a soft red rib, or we can use kind of a standard metal rib. But I'm just coming in and I'm going along the side of the pot. You can go either vertical or horizontal. It's up to you. And I'm just slowly working this until I remove the texture of the Sureform. We'll do a panel of this as an example. Okay, so now we can start to see what this looks like, more or less, that's the texture of the Sureform, that's the texture without the Sureform. So now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to trim a foot on this. I'm going to set this in what I perceive is the center of the pot. Now, one of the things that's a little tricky here is that this is square. So I actually have to look for center at the foot because that is still round. So I'm leaving my finger out here in space. You can see it undulating to and from my finger. And I'm just going to slowly work to get that on center. Okay, so now I have it centered. I'm going to use my 3 pieces of clay to lug this down. I tend to use these lugs on the corner, and I will kind of bend them to take on the corner of the square part of the pot. And then I will put the other 2 kind of on opposing straight sections so that I'm trying to place these essentially equidistant around the pot. So now I need to define my foot here. So I'm going to make a pretty wide foot. I think about this as something that's going to hold a hot liquid in it. So this is going to be my inside line, and then I'll make my outside line about here. And I always start by removing the exterior material. So I'm using this portion of my trimming tool to start to remove this outer section of the clay. Now the inside bottom of my pot has a rounded curve. A continuous curve is self-supporting, so we don't have to put the foot directly underneath of our change in direction because we have a continuous curve in the bottom. But I am sort of creating an arch here to help carry the weight of the wall of this pot. Okay, so the exterior is about where I want it. I'm going to take my metal rib and just create a little bit of compression, removing all that visual information that's on the surface of the pot. And then I'm going to start by trimming my inside corner. I always trim just inside of the foot. It gives me a little bit of a barrier as I'm trimming out from the center. I also utilize this bottom center for support, and so it's the last thing that I want to remove is that bottom center of the pot. I didn't leave a ton of material in the bottom of this, so I'm not going to trim an excessively deep foot. I just want to be able to leave a little bit of glaze inside of here. I think that looks good for the depth. And then I'm going to trim from the center out. I'm going to leave a little bit of a curve in here because, like I mentioned, the inside of my pot has a curve. All right, so I have my foot trimmed on the inside. I'm just going to come in and I'm going to take this inside corner and this outside corner off. I don't want those corners to chip. And then I'm going to take my fingers, I'm going to kind of straddle over the walls of the foot, and I'm just going to compress just a little bit so I get a nice smooth bottom to my pot. Now we can see kind of the profile of my square pot. That's my smoother side. Again, I could come back and clean that up a little bit more, and then the side that has the Sherform marks on it. I'd like to kind of keep that and have a little bit of the grain to the surface of the pot coming through the glazed surface.